My name is Caleb Reed. I grew up in a small, quiet town called Willow Creek, a place where the scent of cut grass and old money hung in the air with equal weight. Our house was a handsome colonial on a street lined with maple trees, a picture of suburban peace. But inside those walls, there were two sons and only one heir to the family's pride. My brother, Nathan, was the heir. I was just the other one. It was a truth as old as our first baby photos. Nathan's page in the album is a collage of smiles, tiny fists gripping my father's finger, with my mother's elegant script captioning each moment, Nathan's first smile, our little champion. My page has a single, slightly blurry photo of me in a hospital bassinet. The caption, in my father's blocky, impatient handwriting, just says, Caleb. My father, Marcus, was a man who believed in clear investments. Nathan was built for the win, he'd say, watching my brother round the bases in a little league game, his voice filled with a kind of proprietary certainty. My mother, Eleanor, would nod, her smile a quiet affirmation. They never said I was built for losing, they simply didn't mention what I was built for at all. It was an absence, a silence that shaped me more profoundly than any criticism ever could. Nathan was a natural athlete, with an easy charm that drew people to him like moths to a porch light. He was the star pitcher, the homecoming king, the son who reflected my parents' best hopes for themselves. I was quiet and bookish, more comfortable with the scent of sawdust and wood glue than the roar of a crowd. In the garage, tucked away behind the lawnmower and dusty boxes of holiday decorations, I had a small workbench. It was my sanctuary. I'd spend hours there, sanding down reclaimed lumber, learning the language of wood grain, the patient art of bringing something forgotten back to life. In my sophomore year of high school, I entered a regional artisan fair. I'd spent 3 months restoring a dilapidated writing desk I'd found by the curb, its mahogany surface scarred and its delicate legs wobbly. I coaxed it back to beauty, refinishing the wood until it glowed like honey in the sun and reinforcing the joinery with a craftsman's patience. I won second place. The judges spoke of an old soul's touch and a remarkable eye for potential. My parents didn't come to the fair. Nathan had a baseball scrimmage that afternoon. You understand, Caleb, my father had said, not as a question, but as a statement. Scouts could be there. It's a crucial time for him. There were no scouts at a high school scrimmage in April. But in our family, the possibility of Nathan's future always outweighed the certainty of my present. When I brought home the blue ribbon and a small cash prize, my mother said, "That's lovely, dear," before turning to ask Nathan if he needed his uniform washed for the next day. The ribbon sat on my dresser for a week before it was accidentally knocked into the trash. The only person who truly saw the desk, who ran his hand over the smooth finish and understood the hours I'd poured into it, was Finn. Finn was my only real friend, a lanky, perpetually amused kid who rode a beat-up 10-speed and had a knack for seeing through the polite facades of our town. He didn't care about baseball or popularity. He cared about things that were real. "Your dad's a piece of work," he said, leaning against my workbench. "He doesn't get that this," he gestured to my tools, my projects, the faint, sweet smell of wood shavings, "is just as real as throwing a ball." It was Finn I was with when I first met Maya. She worked at the Turning Page, a dusty, magical used bookstore downtown. I was searching for old woodworking manuals, and she was perched on a rolling ladder, her dark hair tied up in a messy bun, a smudge of ink on her cheek. She didn't just point me to the right section, she climbed down and asked me what I was building. It was a question no one else had ever really asked. Not with genuine interest. I found myself telling her about the writing desk, about the way a piece of wood can tell you what it wants to become if you just listen. She listened, her brown eyes full of a warmth that felt like coming home. "That's a beautiful way to see the world," she'd said, and in that simple sentence, she gave me a piece of myself I hadn't known was missing. Maya became my other sanctuary. We'd spend hours in that bookstore, talking amidst the quiet company of 1,000 stories. She saw the splinters in my hands not as a sign of a messy hobby, but as proof of creation. She was the first person I ever felt I didn't have to explain myself to. The summer before senior year, the disparity in my family reached a new, uncomfortable peak. For our 18th birthday, Nathan and I are twins, a fact my parents often seemed to treat as a clerical error. They threw a big backyard party. At the end of the night, my father gathered everyone for the grand finale. He tossed Nathan a set of keys. Sitting in the driveway was a beautifully restored 1970s pickup truck, its blue paint gleaming under the porch light. It was the kind of truck I dreamed of, a classic piece of machinery I would have loved to work on. For the man of the house, my father announced, clapping Nathan on the back. A vehicle for a young man with places to go. Then, my mother handed me a small, neatly wrapped box. Inside was a high-end, brand-name toolkit. "So you can keep up with your hobby," she said with a placid smile. The crowd offered a polite smattering of applause. The tools were expensive, objectively a fine gift. But the message was clear: Nathan got a future, I got a hobby. Even Nathan looked uncomfortable, dingling the keys in his hand. "We could share it," he offered quietly, but my father waved the idea away. "Don't be silly. Caleb doesn't need to be driving all over. He's happy in his workshop." That night, lying in my bed, listening to the faint sound of Nathan and his friends laughing as they took the truck for a spin, I made a quiet vow. I would leave Willow Creek. I would build a life so full and so real that their opinion of it would be nothing more than a distant, irrelevant echo. My plan wasn't born of anger, but of a deep, primal need for air. I had to go somewhere I could finally breathe. The final year of high school was a masterclass in living parallel lives under one roof. Nathan was fielding scholarship offers from colleges with prestigious baseball programs, his name a regular feature in the local paper. My father took to carrying the clippings in his wallet. I, meanwhile, spent my evenings and weekends working at a hardware store, saving every dollar I could, and my nights applying for scholarships in furniture design and restoration at schools far from Willow Creek. When my acceptance letter arrived from a well-regarded arts college in the coastal city of Bayview, complete with a substantial scholarship for my portfolio, I placed it on the kitchen counter. My mother picked it up, scanned it, and said, "Bayview? That's awfully far. And isn't that expensive?" "The scholarship covers most of it," I said. "Well, that's practical," was her only reply. A week later, when Nathan signed his letter of intent to play for a state university 2 hours away, my parents had a catered dinner to celebrate. Graduation was the epilogue to my childhood. On a sun-drenched afternoon, we all sat on folding chairs on the football field. When Nathan's name was called, my father's cheer was a booming, triumphant sound that echoed across the field. When my name was called, followed by the announcement of my scholarship, their applause was a polite, obligatory patter, lost in the sea of noise. After the ceremony, we went out to a fancy restaurant. It was a table for 4, but the conversation orbited entirely around one person. Nathan's dorm, Nathan's training schedule, Nathan's bright future. It was as if my own future was an invisible, weightless thing. Maya had been accepted to the main university in Bayview. Our plans had aligned like constellations. She was my true north. She knew about my savings, my quiet determination to leave. She didn't see it as running away, she saw it as running toward. I left 2 weeks after graduation. I packed my life into a few cardboard boxes and my old sedan. My tools, carefully wrapped in old towels, took up most of the trunk. When I said goodbye, my mother hugged me stiffly. "Do be careful," she said. My father shook my hand. "Don't forget who you are," he said, a phrase that felt both meaningless and impossibly heavy. Nathan was the only one who seemed to understand the magnitude of it. He walked me out to my car, leaning against the door as I did a final check. "You're really doing it," he said, a note of something like admiration in his voice. "I have to," I replied. He nodded, kicking at a loose piece of gravel. "Listen, Cal, about all the stuff. The truck, everything. I know it wasn't fair. It's not your fault, Nathan. Maybe not, he said, meeting my eyes. But I didn't fight it either. I should have. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to me. I clapped him on the shoulder. Just play well, I said. And call me sometime. Driving away from Willow Creek, watching the maple trees of my street recede in the rearview mirror, I didn't feel sad. I felt a profound and terrifying sense of release, like a ship casting off its moorings, sailing out of a familiar, shallow harbor and into the vast, unknown sea. Bayview was waiting. Bayview was a city of salt air, steep hills, and the constant, reassuring cry of gulls. It was the opposite of Willow Creek's curated tranquility. It was loud, chaotic, and gloriously anonymous. Maya and I found a small, second-floor apartment in a neighborhood of colorful old houses, the kind of place with slanted floors and charming, drafty windows. It wasn't much, but it was ours. I enrolled in my program and poured myself into my craft. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who spoke my language, the language of dovetail joints and wood finishes, of honoring the history in a piece of furniture while giving it a new future. I took a part-time job at a custom cabinetry shop, learning from a master craftsman with hands as gnarled as ancient oak. Maya, studying literature, filled our tiny apartment with books and the scent of fresh coffee. We were poor and busy, but we were building a life from scratch, and it was the most rewarding work I had ever done. My communication with my parents dwindled to sporadic, perfunctory phone calls. They'd ask vague questions about my classes, I'd give vague answers, and then the conversation would inevitably pivot to Nathan's latest triumph on the baseball field. After a while, the calls stopped altogether. It was a quiet, mutual ghosting. Nathan and I texted occasionally, a fragile thread connecting our two different worlds. A few years passed like this, a steady rhythm of work, study, and slow, hard-won progress. I started taking on my own commissions, restoring antiques for local clients. I named my little business Second Bloom Furnishings. It felt right. By the time I graduated, I had a waiting list of projects and a small but growing reputation. Maya was accepted into a master's program. We were making it. One evening, as we sat on our lumpy, second-hand sofa, watching the fog roll in over the bay, I knew it was time. I'd been carrying the ring in my pocket for weeks, a simple, elegant band I had designed myself, with a small, conflict-free diamond nestled in a setting that resembled a new leaf. A few weeks later, I got an unexpected call from my mother. Her voice was unnaturally bright. "Caleb, darling. We're having a small dinner for your father's and my 30th anniversary. At the Gilded Sparrow. We'd love for you and Maya to be there. Nathan is coming, of course." The Gilded Sparrow was Willow Creek's fanciest restaurant, a place of hushed tones and heavy silverware. It was a transparent olive branch, a summons back into their orbit. My first instinct was to say no. "Maybe we should go," Maya said gently, seeing the conflict on my face. "It's a big anniversary. It might be a chance to. I don't know. Start over." I was doubtful, but I loved her for her optimism. And a small, foolish part of me hoped she might be right. I decided this would be the perfect moment. In front of my family, on a night meant to celebrate a long-term commitment, I would ask Maya to build a future with me. It felt poetic, a way of grafting my new life onto the old, of showing them the beautiful thing I had built for myself. The evening of the dinner was tense. My parents were polite but distant. Marcus talked at length about a recent promotion at his firm, while Eleanor offered strained compliments about Maya's dress. Nathan, now a rising star in his college league, seemed tired, the pressure of being the family's designated success story beginning to show around his eyes. After the main course, as the waiter cleared the plates, Marcus stood to make a toast. He spoke of 30 years of partnership, of building a family, of the pride he felt. His eyes, I noted, rested solely on Nathan as he said it. Then, I stood up. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I'd like to say something, too, I began, my voice steadier than I expected. Everyone turned to look at me. For a long time, I said, looking directly at Maya, her face illuminated by the candlelight, I felt like I was working with reclaimed materials, trying to build something sturdy out of pieces other people had overlooked. And then I met you. You didn't see me as a project to be fixed. You saw the potential. You saw me. You are the strongest, most beautiful part of the life I've built. Her eyes were shining with tears. I reached into my pocket, my fingers closing around the small velvet box. I got down on one knee. The restaurant grew quiet, the gentle clinking of cutlery ceasing as nearby tables turned to watch. Maya, I said, my voice thick with emotion, will you marry me? I opened the box to reveal the ring. A soft gasp went through the room. And then, my father moved. He stood up, stepped forward, and before I could react, he reached down and plucked the ring from the box. He held it up between his thumb and forefinger, squinting at it under the dim light. The entire restaurant was silent. This is a fine ring, Caleb, he said, his voice carrying across the hushed room. Too fine to be wasted on a grand gesture that you're not prepared for. He turned to my brother. Let's save it for Nathan. He'll be getting engaged to his girlfriend soon, I'm sure. He's on a solid career path. He can provide for a family. It's the logical next step for him. The world tilted. Time seemed to slow down, every detail sharpening with excruciating clarity, the shocked, pale face of my mother, Nathan's jaw dropping in disbelief, the stunned expressions of the strangers at the next table. Maya stared at my father, her beautiful, tear-filled eyes now frozen with a mixture of horror and fury. Dad, what the hell are you doing? Nathan choked out, half rising from his chair. I'm being practical, Marcus said, his voice unwavering, as if he were discussing a stock portfolio. Marriage is a serious investment. Nathan is the blue-chip stock here. Caleb. Well, he's still a speculative venture. My hand, still outstretched and empty, began to tremble. I slowly stood up, my legs feeling like they were made of sand. Give me the ring, I said. My voice was dangerously quiet. My mother finally found her voice, a placating, poisonous whisper. Marcus, perhaps not here. But he has a point, Caleb. You and Maya are just starting out. A long engagement might be more sensible. Give me the ring. Nathan was on his feet now, his face flushed with anger. Dad, give him the goddamn ring back right now. This is insane. My father looked from me to Nathan, a flicker of confusion in his eyes, as if he couldn't comprehend why his flawless logic was being challenged. He finally, reluctantly, dropped the ring into my palm. His touch felt like ice. I didn't look at it. I closed my fist around it and turned to Maya. Her face was a mask of heartbreak. I reached for her hand. Let's go, I whispered. We walked out of the restaurant, leaving our half-eaten dessert, my stunned family, and a room full of gawking strangers behind us. We didn't say a word until we were out in the cool night air. Nathan came running out after us. Cal, I am so sorry. I had no idea. He's never. It's not your fault, Nathan, I said, my voice flat. It's just who he is. I was a fool to think it could ever be different. I turned to Maya and gently tucked a stray piece of hair behind her ear. I'm sorry, I said to her. That was supposed to be for you. For us. She shook her head, her eyes finally overflowing. Don't apologize. It's not your fault. She took a deep, shuddering breath. And for the record, the answer is yes. 1,000 times, yes. In the middle of that cold, humiliating night, she said yes. But the proposal I had dreamed of was shattered, and in its place was the hard, ugly truth of my family. I had not been grafting a new branch onto the family tree, I had been trying to plant a flower in barren soil. That night, I finally stopped digging. The drive back to Bayview was a long, quiet affair. Maya slept, her head resting on my shoulder, an unspoken testament of trust that I clung to like a lifeline. I drove through the night, the humiliating scene at the restaurant replaying in my mind on a relentless loop. But with each mile that separated me from Willow Creek, the shame began to recede, replaced by a cold, clear resolve. I was done. The next morning, I changed my phone number. I blocked my parents' email addresses and social media profiles. I cut the cord with the finality of a surgeon making a necessary amputation. Nathan texted me from a friend's phone a few days later. They're losing their minds. Mom's crying, Dad's yelling about disrespect. I told them they brought it on themselves. I'm on your side, Cal. 100%. I texted him my new number and told him it was for him only. Maya and I didn't want the memory of that night to be the foundation of our marriage. A month later, we went to the City Hall in Bayview. It was a crisp autumn day, the sky a brilliant, cloudless blue. Our only witnesses were Finn, who had driven up from Willow Creek, and Maya's parents, a warm, kind couple who had embraced me as their own from the moment they met me. We exchanged our vows in a sunlit room overlooking the bay. I slid a simple, new wedding band onto Maya's finger. We didn't need a fine ring or a grand gesture. We just needed each other. Afterwards, we had champagne and cake at Maya's parents' house. It was simple, perfect, and blessedly free of drama. It was ours. Life settled into a new, peaceful rhythm. My business, Second Bloom, began to flourish. What started as small commissions grew into larger projects restoring entire sets of furniture for historic homes, crafting bespoke pieces for interior designers. The work was demanding, but it was honest. I was building a reputation based on my own two hands, my own name. We were finally able to move into a larger apartment, one with a spare room that I converted into a proper design studio. One afternoon, about a year after our wedding, Nathan called. His voice was strained. Dad had a heart attack, he said, the words tumbling out. He's in the hospital in Willow Creek. It was mild, they say, and he's stable. But he's asking for you. A cold stillness settled over me. I felt nothing, not sadness, not anger, not even a grim satisfaction. Just a vast, empty quiet. You don't have to go, Maya said, her hand resting on my arm. She would support me either way. But a strange sort of curiosity began to stir within me. What could he possibly have to say? What final, desperate justification could he offer? It wasn't about forgiveness. It was about closing a door, and I realized I wanted to be the one to turn the key. I drove to Willow Creek alone the next day. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and quiet suffering. I found the room and paused in the doorway. Marcus was sitting up in bed, looking smaller and paler than I had ever seen him, wires taped to his chest. Eleanor sat in a chair beside him, her face a pinched mask of anxiety. Nathan stood by the window, his shoulders slumped. He saw me first and gave a weak, grateful nod. My father's eyes followed his, and when they landed on me, they were filled with a weary, unfamiliar emotion. You came, he said, his voice raspy. Nathan said you wanted to see me, I replied, my tone neutral. I remained by the door, keeping a safe distance. He gestured for my mother and Nathan to leave the room. Eleanor looked like she wanted to protest, but a single look from Marcus silenced her. Nathan squeezed my shoulder as he passed. Just hear him out, he whispered. When we were alone, my father stared at his hands, which lay frail and still on the white hospital blanket. We only ever wanted one child, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. Your mother and I. When we found out we were having twins, we were overwhelmed. It wasn't in our plan. I said nothing, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. You were the smaller one, he continued, his gaze still fixed on his hands. You were sick a lot in the first few weeks. Jaundice, trouble keeping food down. Nathan was robust. We made a decision. A practical decision. He finally looked up at me, his eyes clouded with a lifetime of buried truths. We found a family. A good couple who couldn't have children. They were going to adopt you. The air left my lungs in a silent rush. The years of feeling like a spare part, an afterthought, suddenly coalesced into a single, horrifying point of origin. I wasn't just the less favored son. I was the son they had never wanted at all. What happened? I asked, my voice a hollow echo of itself. They backed out at the last minute, he said. They said they couldn't bring themselves to separate twins. After that, we kept you. But the plan was already set in our minds. We would invest everything in the stronger one. We thought it was the best way to ensure the family's success. That Nathan's success would be enough for everyone. So I was a contingency plan, I stated, not a question. He flinched. We gave you a home. We fed you, clothed you. You gave me a roof, but not a home, I countered, the words tasting like ash. You gave me food, but you starved me of everything else. Do you have any idea what it was like? To live your entire life as a ghost in your own family? For the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine remorse in his eyes. I see it now, he whispered. Lying here. You see things differently. We were wrong, Caleb. So profoundly wrong. I can't take it back. I wanted you to know the truth. Not as an excuse. Just as the truth. My mother came back and then, her face etched with worry. Marcus, you need to rest. She looked at me, her expression hardening. We did what we thought was best. You had a comfortable life. Comfortable? I laughed, a short, bitter sound. You tried to give me away. Was that part of your plan for my comfortable life? Eleanor's face went white. Nathan, who had followed her in, stopped dead in his tracks. You what? He asked, his voice cracking. He looked from our father to our mother, his face a canvas of dawning horror. You tried to give him away? My mother stammered, it was a long time ago. We were young. But Nathan wasn't listening. He was looking at me, his eyes filled with a new, terrible understanding. All the slights, the inequalities, the casual cruelties of our childhood were suddenly cast in a stark, monstrous light. I looked at the three of them, my father, frail and broken, my mother, defensive to the last, my brother, reeling from the blast of a truth he never knew. I had my answer. I had the missing piece of the puzzle of my own life. I have to go, I said, turning to leave. Caleb, wait, Marcus called out, his voice pleading. I paused at the door but didn't turn back. You don't get to ask for anything from me, I said, my voice clear and steady. Not now. Not ever. You made your investment a long time ago. Live with the returns. I walked out of that hospital room and didn't look back. I left the ghost of the unwanted child behind me, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely and utterly free. The weeks following the hospital confession were a strange, quiet time of recalibration. It was as if I'd been walking with a limp my whole life without knowing why, and now, finally understanding the nature of the injury, I could begin to truly heal. I told Maya everything. She listened, holding me as I finally let loose the deep, shuddering grief for the little boy who was never meant to be. My parents tried to call. I didn't answer. They left voicemails, me father's, pleading and repentant, my mother's, a confusing mix of apology and self-pity. I deleted them without listening to the end. I wasn't ready. I didn't know if I ever would be. The one person I did talk to was Nathan. He drove to Bayview a month later. We sat in my workshop, the air thick with the scent of cedar and varnish. He looked older, the easy confidence he'd always worn now tempered by a new gravity. I've been thinking about everything, he said, running a hand over a half-finished tabletop. The birthdays, the truck, the way Dad always talked about my games like they were the most important thing in the world. I knew it was unfair. I didn't understand the depth of it. I'm so sorry, Cal. I benefited from a system that was built to break you. It wasn't your fault, Nathan, I said, and this time, I meant it completely. We were just kids, playing the roles they assigned us. I'm done playing my role, he said, his voice firm. I'm not their blue-chip stock. I'm just their son. Same as you. It was the beginning of a new chapter for us. For the first time, we were just brothers, untangled from the web of our parents' making. A year later, Nathan got engaged. He called me before he even told our parents. I want you to be my best man, he said. There was no hesitation in my voice when I said yes. The wedding was a year after that, held in a beautiful old barn in the countryside, halfway between Willow Creek and Bayview. Maya and I went, not knowing what to expect. My parents were there, of course. They approached us during the reception, looking nervous and uncertain. Caleb, Marcus said, his voice quiet. He looked healthier, but the arrogance was gone, replaced by a permanent caution. Maya. You both look wonderful. Thank you for coming. We're here for Nathan, I said simply. It wasn't a barb, just a fact. He nodded, accepting it. Of course. As you should be. My mother stood beside him, clutching her purse. Your workshop, she said to me. Nathan says it's doing very well. We're happy to hear that. It was a clumsy, fragile attempt, but it was an attempt nonetheless. Maya offered a small, polite smile. He's very talented, she said. Later in the evening, as best man, I had to give a toast. I stood before the crowd, glass in hand. I saw my parents watching me, their expressions unreadable. They say the strongest bonds are forged in fire, I began, looking at Nathan and his new wife, Olivia. But I think sometimes they're also built slowly, with patience and understanding, like a piece of fine furniture. You have to honor the grain, respect the material, and have the vision to see what it can become. I raised my glass. To Nathan and Olivia. May you build a life together that is strong, beautiful, and entirely your own. People clapped. Nathan came over and wrapped me in a fierce hug. Thank you, he whispered. As the night wound down, I found myself standing on the porch, looking out at the stars. My father walked out and stood beside me, a respectful distance between us. That was a good speech, he said. Thanks. We stood in silence for a moment. I know I have no right to ask, he said, his voice heavy with the words he'd rehearsed 100 times in his head. But I hope that one day, you'll let us be part of your life again. Not as we were. But differently. We'll follow your rules. Whatever they are. I thought about the years of silence, the calculated neglect, the devastating confession in the hospital room. Forgiveness felt like a distant country I had no plans to visit. But peace. Peace felt possible. There's only one rule, I said, turning to look him in the eye. Respect. You will respect me, you will respect my wife, and you will respect the life we have built. There are no second chances on that. If you can do that, we can see. He nodded slowly, a profound sense of relief washing over his features. We can do that, he said. I promise. It wasn't a resolution. It wasn't a happy ending where all was forgiven and forgotten. Some things can never be forgotten. But it was a beginning. A second bloom, fragile and uncertain, pushing its way through damaged soil. On the drive home, Maya rested her head on my shoulder. The windows were down, and the cool night air streamed in, carrying the scent of damp earth and new beginnings. I thought of my workshop, of the beautiful, imperfect pieces of wood waiting for me, each with its own story, its own scars. I had learned that you don't erase the scars. You work with them. You sand them down, you bring out their character, and you incorporate them into a new design, making the piece not just beautiful, but whole. Stronger in the broken places. My life was my own creation now, built by hand, and it was more beautiful than anything I could have ever imagined.